Hi, I'm very glad to be here, and what an amazing talk. So I can build on top of what has been said, and I'm hoping that we can have meaningful discussions on top of that. Where's my pointer? Okay. All right, so my original title was a bit different. It was called Digital Human Rights. And the right to encryption and self-sovereign data. And when I first talked about digital human rights, I talked to a lawyer about it, and that lawyer said, that's bullshit. Well, maybe that wasn't the words, but there is no such thing as digital human rights. We have human rights, and they apply for the digital world. Well, I fully agree. The problem is that in our society, we have a lot of people who like to stick to the letter of the law, not so much to the spirit of the law. And in light of this, I think we do need to redefine and really apply our human rights charter to the fact that we're now living in a digital machine age where every step that we're doing, more and more so, is being traced and is being recorded. So the question of what does privacy even mean in such a digital age, and what are my rights in a democracy, if I wish to live in a democracy, is a very crucial question. And I think it's a question we cannot only solve by encrypting it away. That is one tool. We need to have a social, technological, and a broad discussion, an inclusive discussion, just as the speaker before just said. I could not agree more. So privacy in the machine age, what does that mean? First, let's look at privacy in general. What does it mean? Basically, the state of being free from public attention. But as we just discussed in the last question, I mean, public attention is always there, in a way, right? Even before the internet. You have neighbors, you have people who would like to know what you're doing. And while I grew up in a big city, I have a lot of friends who grew up in a small town or in a village. And okay, most of my friends are maybe the outliers of society, but they never felt comfortable living in a small town because they felt that everybody was tracing all their moves and judging them for what they were doing. So they're very happy living in the bigger cities now because in the big city, they have the privacy from being spied upon their neighbors. Well, and then at some point, the internet happened. It used to look like this, somewhat. And when the internet happened, the outliers of society moved from the big towns into the internet. So in the very early stages, it was like the anarchists and who were like gathering around the connected computers and trying to talk together in sometimes in an anonymous way. And but then the internet became bigger. And everybody started adopting it, and big data started to become a thing. And we've heard a great deal about that just right now. And I would like to focus on one thing, that big data might be inconvenient if we are receiving targeted advertising through Facebook, trying to sell us something we Googled yesterday and already bought yesterday. That's maybe inconvenient, and that's not nice. But we have really very disturbing use cases of using big data. And I don't know who read that Guardian article about following the documents and how Steve Bannon's company is kind of connected to the PsyOps corporations running the Brexit campaign. This is something we should really, really be very worried about, among everything else that has been said before. Yes, let's go back to the internet. At some point in time, that happened. And when that happened, Homeland Security Act. And, well, when that happened, one issue was encryption. And communicating through encrypted means makes you suspicious of terrorist activity. And the United States was not the only country to adopt such kind of laws after 9/11. I'm from Austria originally. It's a country where actually the right to encryption is a constitutional, the right to private communication is a constitutional right. But in Austria, anti-terrorist paragraph was adopted into the law. And then that happened. Oh, sorry, that's encryption. This happened. In 2007, 12 animal rights activists in Austria were arrested without any charges under the Terrorist Act because the reason why they could arrest them under the Terrorist Act was because they were using encrypted means for communication. And some of those 12 people were in jail without any charges for almost 2 years under the Terrorist Act. And so we have to ask ourselves, why is the right to encryption not a human right? At least in countries like Germany and Austria, the right to private communication is a fundamental right that we have in the Constitution. I understand the Americans don't have that in the same way, but we do actually have that. To answer the last question from the previous talk, I know technology, I know how to use encryption. I chose not to use encryption because, for the very reason, because I know that my very being, I'm of Iranian descent. I have traveled back and forth to Iran. I've done business with Iran because I had a startup doing travels there. I have a lot of Israeli friends. My whole social graph is all over the place, and I work in blockchain. I do not want to raise, because I know that I raise a lot of flags, I choose to communicate without encryption because I don't want the same thing to happen to me, like to the animal rights activists. Now, I know their case was a bit different because we all know that animal rights activists work on the fringes of legality very often. So they did other stuff, right? But the way they were arrested and the paragraph under which they were arrested was absurd. We need to talk about this. We need to talk about the fact, why am I so paranoid that I choose not to use encryption? I choose to be transparent because I'm afraid that somebody might throw me into a jail in Afghanistan without anyone knowing, just because I'm raising a lot of red flags. So I think in this day and age, yes, fast forwarding to blockchain. In the client-server world, well, we have a problem because other people own our data. It's a world of data slavery, where we don't even own and control our data. That's a problem. We're trying to resolve this with the decentralized web and blockchain, but the problem is that by decoupling the data layer from the discovery layer, it's now transparent to everyone. So this is why Zcash is so important. The technology they're working on, zero-knowledge proofs, would make it less transparent, but encryption is only one tool. So as we're approaching the decentralized web and as we're reinventing our data structures, I think we also need to redefine how we design our data in a way that we don't only encrypt it, but we also have privacy by design. And we're in the very, very early stages of this technology. Amazing things are happening. I myself, with Joachim and the whole crew, are working on identity solution where you have inbuilt privacy by design. I think it's amazing what Ocean is doing because they're trying to, now we already have all those big data silos. This data that's out there, it's already out there. We also talked about it in the question before, right? The things you did in the past could come back to you now. How can we get ownership of that data back, or control? And I think the Ocean protocol is doing an amazing step in that direction of giving us provenance and control of what is happening with our data. And it could be a great transition. And I think that we need to discuss these new technologies and how we want to redesign the internet in a very inclusive way. So that doesn't happen, right? Because in my opinion, I work with blockchain for 3 years now. Blockchain is an amazing technology. It's a very powerful technology. If we do it right, we can create a universal freedom machine. But if we don't get it right, especially that privacy part, this could happen. And so I'm very glad we have this conference. I saw that many of the talks are raising awareness on these critical issues. And yeah, if you want to talk more about it, follow us, BlockchainHub. Me personally, happy to be here. Thank you.
Does anyone have a question for Shermin? There is a question.
So today we know that so all the technology that is out has made everybody interested in freedom because it's so accessible to us, seemingly through the internet. But at the same time, with the prevalence of free media everywhere and people blogging and taping stuff and putting it on YouTube, we can all see all over the world when you have clampdowns on demonstrations. We see now Catalonia, where really horrible things are happening. And so our need for freedom, even in our Western countries, are kind of hitting a ceiling where we see that the deep state is there, it's being acknowledged by the top people in government, and we see that there are some intrinsic mechanisms where it seems like we cannot pass. In our strive for privacy and digital rights, how do you see we come past that ceiling?
Well, I would like to reinforce what has been said before. First and foremost, we need education. We need to talk about it. And then, first of all, we need to talk about the issue. In general, what does privacy mean? What are human rights in our digital age? And then I think we very much need to talk about and educate the public what is happening right now and how future technologies could solve this problem, but also how future technologies could be a threat. So I'm going very often I'm at blockchain conferences, it's always about, oh yes, this is a cool new technology. And I think we need to start talking more about where the potential dangers could be. And in an inclusive way, because it's not only a technological problem, it's a sociological problem, it's a socioeconomic problem. And we have certain power structures, as you just said. And we just need to do it. The techies technology can bring new solutions. But we need to discuss what kind of solution do we want to have. We just need to do more advocacy. I'm trying to do that for my part. So if anyone wants to support this, approach me. We need to get the message out there and do more propaganda and use words like maybe digital human rights, which from a technocratic lawyer point of view might be bullshit. But if that's what's going to do the job for marketing, let's use that word. Yep.